Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. You are listening to Society Bites Radio. My name is Jillian Beth, and I'm an intuitive healer and coach on a mission to empower women by reconnecting them to their inner wisdom. And I am so grateful to have all of you here with us today. And I'm extra excited for the very special guest we have. He has been a friend of mine for a while. We always have amazing conversations, including, I think, the topic we're going to talk about today. And this is actually going to be a two-part series, guys. So definitely make sure if you enjoyed today, tune in next week where we're going to continue this conversation on bringing peace and unity to our culture. And our guest today, let me wait no longer, is Mr. J.B. HERRERA. Now, J.B. is the CEO of Perceptive Insights, and Perceptive is a small business growth acceleration firm. J.B. and his firm work with growth-focused business owners that want to make a massive impact with their business and who want to scale their ventures ethically and profitably, which we all do, right? And are willing to put the effort to be successful on a daily basis. He is passionate about assisting small businesses, startups, create and implement the systems necessary to accomplish their goals. He's an inspiring presenter on the subjects of collaborative capitalism, working together to build better communities, and designing and building your dream life. He holds a BA in philosophy from Santa Clara University. And he is a current board member of the National Hispanic Organization of Real Estate Associates. Welcome, JB.
Hi, how you doing, Jillian Beth?
Oh, so good.
Right, absolutely. And we've known each other long enough, so it's just Jim, okay?
Okay, we'll go with Jim, absolutely.
Okay.
So those close to him get to go with Jim. So all of you are welcome into the inner circle today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I would love to start with, when you and I were going back and forth about different topics to speak about today, you brought up this wonderful idea of the topic on bringing peace and unity to our culture. So I would love to just start with, why this topic right now?
Well, thank you. This is a great question. Well, I believe if we look around in popular culture, that we live in a fragmented and a very cynical world. I'm a baby boomer, and I've gone through many different business cycles and different generations, and have seen a lot of different things. I remember, for example, the time when we had the movie The Miracle, if you're familiar with that, the 1976 hockey Olympic team. And so it's a great film. You have to watch it because it talks specifically about the change in America. It was at that time we went through this massive change where all of a sudden everything that we believed about ourselves was thrown out the window. We had things to deal with like Watergate, right? Gas prices went shooting up through the roof, and all those types of things. And for the first time, we believed that as a society, that our next generation was going to have it worse than the previous generations. And from that moment forward, we've been on this interesting trip, a winding path that's been going back and forth until finally we find ourselves in a place where, we're pretty cynical. We we have a tendency not to believe in almost anything that we can see. And yet what's really interesting is we have a tendency to believe everything that is proposed to us by people that we identify with. And that fragmentation. And that's why I think
so true.
Right? So what we need to do, at least in my opinion, is to address those issues, because I believe in the fundamental humanity and unity that we have as people. And sorry.
That's all right.
So we'll have the opportunity to really move forward with bringing people together if we can do a certain number of things properly. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I would love to talk about those things because while you talk about the movie and you were saying that now that came out just a few shy years before I
Right?
entered
Exactly.
this planet,
Right?
I immediately was thinking of like the Truman Show, right? And the
Right?
Matrix. So those are more like my generation, but where
Right?
everything is turned on its head.
Right. And so you can actually point to really interesting things. So they're in different generations, they have those crisis points. Some
Yeah.
people remember when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, Robert F. Kennedy in the late
Yes.
60s. Some people, remember what happened with the Challenger, fiasco, the savings and loan crisis. These are all defining moments. What happened at 9/11, right? These are all defining
Mm-hmm.
moments for different generations. But what's interesting is when you actually look back on the body of all of those activities, what was going on in culture at the time, you can see the trend, and I'll call it a downward spiral from being excited about the future to being wary of the present to now being cynical of the future.
Mm.
And that's really
So,
it's a challenge. We have to really, we have the tools to bring us together, but unfortunately, I think some of those tools we've built with the intention of bringing us together have actually driven us apart.
absolutely. And do you want to get into the tools on this show, or should we leave that for the next one? What do you think is best?
Well, we can actually we can have that in the next show.
Okay.
We can talk to them at a really high level. Everybody knows the tools that we currently have that are supposed to bring people together, right? The internet and all of our social media programs. Those are all originally intended to bring people together, but and we can go into the specifics later on. But fundamentally, that's driven us apart because we have our
why is that?
We have our tribes, right? We've gone from a psychological perspective, right? There's a couple of different fundamental things. We need to have community, right? The purpose of your show is to empower women to do different things, right? To fulfill their destinies. And that's a wonderful, beautiful purpose to have. Now, there are other people who have different purposes that are wonderful and beautiful to have too. The challenge is when we have these two different types of programs and purposes that are in conflict with each other. And that becomes a challenge because let me ask you a question. Have you ever, how would you feel if you heard that a white person said, "I'm not going to buy a product from a black person"? How would you describe that scenario?
Well, my first initial reaction when you say that is completely appalled because it doesn't compute to me to say something like that. So it surprises me when somebody else would. And even, even broader than that, what does that have to do with whatever the product is? If it's a product you want and need to fulfill whatever gap you have, what does it matter?
Exactly, right? However, what we have a tendency to say, because we have a specific tribe that we want to support, we'll buy products and services from our tribe, even though the best product and service may not be from our tribe.
Okay, so this is interesting because, and taking it out of the context of race, because that's definitely one thing.
Right.
I'm thinking about, okay, what my thing, of course, is all about empowering women. And I don't know how much you know about like the feminine, but I'm sure you're aware of this to some degree. The feminine is all about community, coming together, working together for the betterment of the overall good. Wonderful. Now, absolutely. It also makes me think of, though, when you ask me that question, what is there really a difference there to me saying, okay, there's this product or thing that I want, and I see that it's offered by a man. And I'm not like a man basher, a male basher, but if I were to say, well, no, I'm not going to buy that from him because I would rather support a woman who has the same one. Is that any different, really?
Yeah, that's the question. And I think in some instances, the answer is it's different. You know, being able to support. Now, I'll tell you, coming from where I come from, I'm a first generation immigrant into the United States. And so I needed to have people who wanted to support me, right? Because as a Mexican American, I had to overcome an awful lot of things in the 60s and 70s. So just as there's a glass ceiling for women, there was a glass ceiling for Hispanics. So there's a challenge that kind of goes along with that. But here's the difference. Supporting women, which, by the way, I do. I wanted to kind of let you know. I don't know if you even know this, but many of my clients, in fact, 95% of my clients are women. And,
that's awesome. And you referred me some amazing women. So I know you're a big supporter of that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so what's really interesting is that supporting your tribe is not a bad thing. In fact, I think it's a really good thing. The challenge is when that support becomes an anti-movement against something else. That's when it goes off the rails, right? So
couldn't agree more. Go ahead.
Right. So in the situation that you just described, where you have two equal products, one from a man and one from a woman, there's nothing wrong with selecting the woman's product over the man's product. No big deal. But when you say, you know what, I will never buy a product from a man, I'm only going to buy a product from a woman, that's when we have the problem. Can you see the intention, the emotion below that, right?
Yes, 1000%. And it was one of the coaches that I worked with in the past that brought this to light in a new way for me as well, when he was talking about, you know, the feminists and how what it was really, I think, started at and meant to be was not what it turned into for so many people, where it did become just what you said, this like, screw men are terrible, like will not support, no, like that's not doing anybody any good. You know, there's a way to empower a certain gender or a certain race without disempowering or putting down another one. Right.
You're absolutely right. And here's one of the other challenges that I think that we have. I'll remember this vividly. I was walking out of a courthouse one day, and I was, you know, raised to be polite to people. And so I opened the door. It was a big, heavy, you know, glass door. I opened the door for a woman who was right behind me, and she slapped me. And she said to me, I don't need a man to open any door for me. I can do it all on my own. I don't need you. Now, this is at a pretty young age for me, right? This was my late 20s, early 30s. And that confused me. So now what do I do? How do I treat women? What are the expectations that they have of me? I'm not sure. The roles are now different. Now, the reason why that story is so important is not because of how it affected me, but because every single action, every single act that we have with other people has unintended consequences down the road.